Hey, what's up? This is Tim with Studio4Media.com and welcome to another tutorial here in Maya. And today we're going to be taking a look at some dynamic effects, creating a realistic ball of fire, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, start out, make sure you're in your Dynamics tab, and under Fluid Effects, create a new 3D container. I'm going to be going over these things a little bit fast. I mean, I'm having an assumption that you know at least a little bit about dynamics and a little bit about fluid containers, but I'll be going over the values and why I'm putting in the values I am as we continue on. Okay, so we have our container here. Let's go ahead and make some quick adjustments. Our resolution needs to be a little bit higher than it is right now. Our boundaries, well, before we do anything, so I can explain why I'm doing what, go into Fluid Effects and let's create a new emitter. And let's make sure it's a volume emitter. The fluid drop-off, we want that to be 0, and I'll show you why here in a second. And cylindrical is fine, you can make it whatever you want. Let's rotate this 90 degrees. And X. Okay. If we hit play right now, you get this kind of smoky effect, and we want the boundaries to be none on the top, because if you see right here, it's going to hit the top and bounce off, then it's going to hit the sides and bounce off, and we don't want that. We want it to just escape out of the top. So no boundaries on X. On Y we want just the bottom, so that'd be the negative Y, and on Z we want none. Then we can see our resolution right here. We actually want that to be just turning that off, so just go to bounding box. And we want to turn on our temperature and our fuel, set those both to dynamic grid, and then let's go back to our emitter and make sure we turn that fluid drop off to 0. And the reason being, right now our effect is real thin and doesn't look very good. Looks like just like a little trail of smoke you'd see coming off a match after you light it, maybe. We want it to be a little bit thicker, and even if I if I go in here and I adjust some of these settings, you'll see why. High detail solver, turn that to all grids. Solver quality 60. Now when you do that, this is going to be a little bit more pixelated. It's not going to be as smooth, you can see there, and we're going to compensate for that in our render settings. This looks fine, density's fine. That's all good. Let's put some swirl, maybe 2, a little bit of turbulence, 0.001. And that's just going to make it spin a little bit while it's in the container, and then that way it looks like there's air being sucked into it, and then you create a bigger ball of fire in one area, and then it continues on straight, so it'll make it look interesting. I'll come back to the temperature and fuel settings here in a second. I'll come back to these as well. You definitely want to have the quality. This is where I said we'd compensate for that high detail solver. It's not going to change it in our viewport here, but it'll change it in the render settings. So if you turn that up to about 15, that's going to help quite a bit. And we want self-shadowing on. So now you can see we're going to get that incandescent look, and that's from this ramp right here. So if we hit play, it's going to be taking it from this ramp, and you can barely see it. You can see it's changed a little bit. It's not completely white, and you can also see that since we added that swirl and that turbulent, it's not a straight line anymore like a straight puff of smoke. It's actually being manipulated a little bit. But if we go back in here and turn that fluid drop off to 0, you're going to see a huge difference. There we go. And that's what we're going for. We want a big puff of smoke. We're going for a big explosion type look, like a car's caught on fire or an oil tanker, something like that. That's what we're going for. So let's go ahead and go back to our container settings and change around some of the texturing properties. Right now our main color is white, and that's why you see the white bordering all this, and we don't want that. We want more of a black color. Dark gray will do the trick, and right then that's going to make a big difference. And you could even take our ramp and bring those blacks in a little bit, and we can even add another color, maybe a white color, to show that that's really bright. So now we have our thing is really hot, isn't it? Basically white is going to be the hottest color, and you can see it's really hot in there, and then yellow, and then black is going to be the coldest, and it's going off the temperature. That's how you can tell. Our opacity, we can bring that up and we can change that a little bit, and basically all the opacity is doing it's taking the values. So like, for example, if I have the black settings and I want to crush those blacks, I can draw it in right here, or I can raise up the contrast, which is what I'm doing right now. More blacks. If I wanted to crush the whites, I'd pull that side in. So you can make this smooth if you want, kind of smooth it out. Actually, it'd probably be better to smooth the whole entire thing before you start making these points. But you get the idea with that. Pretty simple stuff. I'm just showing you how to kind of set up the container with the right settings for what we're doing. And the main thing we're going to be working with is this textures tab. But before we do that, let's go ahead and just at least get the look of our emitter, what we want it. This looks like it has a lot of flame and not a lot of smoke. And when you're dealing with big fires, you normally get a lot of smoke, and you can see the flame on the inside. And that's the look we're going for. So if you go back to the top, our display, you can see if we change it to density, our density looks good. Our temperature is probably off the charts. Yeah. So we have a lot of temperature. We need to change that. Our fuel is probably stuck at the bottom. You can see it's rising up a little bit. Let's go ahead and just make some quick changes to our temperature tab at least. So if we scroll back down to temperature, let's change the dissipation to at least 0.5 and the diffusion to 2. Let's see what that looks like when we play that back. Basically, I'm just telling it it's gonna diffuse a lot more, so it's not gonna be as straight. You can see there. So this is the diffusion property I added to it, and then it's gonna dissipate faster, so it's not gonna be all the way up. And that diffusion may be a little bit too much. Let's try to bring it down to 1. Probably be better. Our dissipation may be too high. We'll find out. Let's go back to our as rendered tab. Okay, so we're not getting anything in there, but we are getting a lot more smoke, which is what we wanted. And I'm working a little bit, I can see. You could always change these settings down in the shading tab here. If you want more of something, you can just adjust it. So we kind of put more smoke in there, anticipating that we would need more smoke. But you can also change the input bias, and you can say, okay, I want to read more from the left side, which will be all smoke, or I want to be more from the right side, which would be all fire. So basically you're saying from left to right, I want more of, so I'm saying I want more of the right side instead of the left side. And you can do the same thing with the opacity here. If you say I want more smoke or less smoke. So let's increase the smoke because it's kind of thin right now, and increase the color, and that's actually a better look because you can see the smoke inside here, and you can see the flame inside here, and the smoke is surrounding it. Now if we render this out right now, it's going to look basically exactly how it looks right now, just smoother. And that's good. That's what we want for right now. We could even take our container. It's pretty little right now. Just scale it up. So this could be on a propane tank or whatever. And let's go ahead and adjust the movement of it just a little bit. So that looks really good. We got a nice mushroom cloud when it first starts. Then it dissipates, and then you get the smoke, and it's obviously hotter at the bottom. And this is looking really good. It doesn't look like it looks good, but believe me, for the stage that we're at, it's looking good. Alright. Let's go ahead and add a field to our container here, because right now it's just going straight up, and if this was happening in the real world, that would not be the case. So to add a little bit of realism, go to the Fields tab, and let's make a uniform field, and we want it to move our fluid effect to the right in X. So we'll just put +1 in X, so it's going to moving it towards our X axis, and hit create, and we can adjust the settings because it might be a little bit too much, it might be pushing it too much. We want it to kind of go off along the side here, and we don't want it to be too much, but you'll see what I'm talking about here in a bit. So hopefully this is just going to push it off a little bit. Might not be enough. Well, you can see now it's not completely straight up. It's starting to go off to the side a little bit, and that's what we want, because now you can see it's going off to the side, but you still got some nice smoke, and it's going to keep making those really big circles, almost like it has pockets of air. It's sucking in and then igniting those pockets of air, and that's kind of the look we're going for. Okay, let's see here. This is looking pretty good. Like I said, we're going to be focusing mainly on our textures tab, and now that we have basically the container set up the way we want it, it's looking really good. I'm going to render this out. I'll do an IPR render real fast so we can see the changes we're making. So I'm not just going to give you the values that you want. We can actually see the values we want. Now notice this is kind of pixelated and it looks not good. You can see the squares, and that's because we have our if I can scroll up here, our high detail solver is turned on, and that's what's creating that. If we turn that off, it's going to be smooth, and in the long run it'll be better with this high detail solver on, because really where we're getting that effect from is our quality and our contrast. If we turn that quality up, that'll help it a little bit, and we'll do some other things that'll help that along the way too. So our quality is set to 20. That's going to help that. And then if we start messing around with this textures tab, you'll notice it's going to start helping out quite a bit too. So we'll deal with this here in a little bit. Okay, so right now we got some good color, got the smoke looking pretty good. Let's go ahead and turn on our texture incandescence, and make sure we set this coordinate method to grid. There we go. Now if I increase the gain here, you're gonna see it's gonna be really bright. I'll do a value of 3, which will probably blow it up incredibly. Yeah, there we go. So you can see what the gain does. Now obviously that's a little bit too high, but probably a value of 2 would be good. And then now that we have this really nice looking color, and you can start to see the whites, and you got the orange around it, if we increase our frequency amount, you get to see the difference it makes. Because right now it looks like maybe a fire you'd see, like if this was a log, and that's a fire coming off a log, like it's not very big. But if we increase our frequency amount to say a value of 10, you're going to notice now it's going to look like it's a lot bigger bigger of a fire. And of course 10 is too much. Let's try 6. So it's starting to mix with the smoke more, and we can even turn up our frequency ratio to maybe 3. Help that out a little bit. And now you see it's actually starting to look like it's a bigger fire. Like, okay, this is starting to get some depth to it. And our depth max, speaking of depth, we can turn up a little bit. Okay. And you can start to see how it's looking pretty good. Like, you're starting to get some texture to it. It's starting to look like a bigger fire. Let's go ahead and add some other things real fast. Close that out. I just wanted to have that IPR render showed up so you could see what these different effects that we're changing are actually doing. So this is actually looking pretty good. Our quality is nice. One thing I would say that we need to do is let's put a little bit of variance in our emitter here, because right now it's just emitting. We got, you know, 1 density, 1 heat, and 1 fuel, and that's not really what you want in most cases. If we look at our render type, let's see how it's rendering out. We have nice density. Our temperature is looking a lot better since we made those changes. The fuel is actually looking really good. This actually looks pretty good. You could go in there and change those settings. Say, you know, I want more density, I want more heat, more fuel, and that'll really make it look a lot different. But how we have it set up right now is actually pretty good. But what I want to do is I want to at least change how it looks. And we can do that by adding this density emission map. And basically, I have another tutorial on this on how to emit from a texture. And if you've seen that tutorial, it's kind of the same thing. We're emitting the fluid effect only in the area that we tell it to by using the texture. So what we're going to do is we're just going to create a noise texture. And we're going to, first things first, change this noise type to perlin noise. And let's increase the frequency here, so we zoom in. And we really want this to be contrasted. So this needs to go up to maybe a value of 4. There we go. So the higher you're zoomed in is the better. You want more contrast, so Maya can really extrapolate where to emit the fluid effect and where not. And if we just play this back right now, you're going to notice a big difference. It's not going to be just all one color in here. It's actually going to be changing, and you can see it's moving and changing. It's not just going to be full of the fluid effect, and that's what we want. It's a little bit more organic, and especially if I rotate over here to the opposite side and I look on the and through here, you see, okay, so we don't have particles everywhere. And the more we affect, you can see it's not completely full. And that's really what we want. The more we affect this texture, the more that's going to affect this. So if I make it really like this, which is probably not good, but you can see we're going to have big chunks of our emitter is not emitting, like this big chunk right here. And so you want to be careful with that. You don't want to make it too much. But you at least want to have a little bit of, let's say probably just a little bit, so you can have a little bit of change. It's not exactly the same, and that's actually going to help out a lot. Make it look a lot more fluid, a lot more organic, and you can see we have nice colors too. So it's really hot in here, surrounded by nice smoke, and this is looking pretty good. So we can also take this noise and copy it, paste it to the heat. So our heat is changing as well. That'll help just give it a little bit more values if you want. And I think, let's take a look at this compared to it without the heat. We might want to take that expression off, or that texture off, I should say. I'll go ahead and just save this render, and let's take this off and re-render this out. We don't want that. We'll have to go in there and unchain it, but I think this is what we want. And of course, now we have a lot of smoke, and that is can easily be changed. But this looks pretty good. Now what we can do now is that we have all of our settings set up the way we want. We can go in here and tweak these colors a little bit more. I want more fire in there. Just by doing that, probably look a lot better. Yeah, that's looking really good. You have nice smoke effects. You can see the fire inside of the smoke, and we could even increase our frequency more if you want. Increase our gain amount to get more of that glow look. But this is actually looking really good. If we texture the opacity as well, and maybe bring that down just a little bit, it'll help the look of it too. It's not going to change much, but it'll still look good. Now for the case of this tutorial, I have technically it's considered a low resolution. This container right now is set to a low resolution. For the example I think that I put up, the picture I put up, well, let's just see. We're at kind of like a 2:1, 3:1 ratio, and I think the example I put up was 8:1, 9:1. So of course, when you start doing that, your computer starts slowing down a lot. When you start changing this value of base resolution to something higher, like 150 or 200, it's going to slow your computer down a lot. And I just at least wanted to make this tutorial go faster by showing you, you know, you can actually see this almost in real time. So that's why I have it set kind of low. You can always increase that up, and that's going to make your whole entire scene look a lot better. You can see the difference. And if we render this out, so we can kind of see if we're getting our smoke or our flame inside of our smoke, which is really the look we were wanting to go for. So you can see here, you can see our flame inside of our smoke, and when this is moving, it's going to look really good. If we make an actual, you know, batch render this out, and you'll actually see that mushroom cloud get created. It'll look really cool. Something else we can do, we can add a couple expressions. These are going to be simple expressions to help with the give it more variety, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Kind of like how we did the texture on these. We textured the density and the heat. It's kind of the same thing. If we go to the texture time down here in our textures tab, right click, create new expression, and just copy the name, paste it in our expression editor. Say equals time divided by 2. And all this is going to do, if we hit create and close, is this value is going to change. So it's just going to be a random value. If I stop it right now, you can see it's a different value. So it just constantly changes. Just gives it a little bit more randomness. And you can see our texture effect happening there. And of course, this is all just a matter of tweaking, getting the look that you want. The whole purpose of this tutorial was to actually show you the tools and get you familiar with what you need to adjust in order to get the look you're looking for. So you kind of saw how we can randomize our emission properties by just putting a texture to it. You saw how we can make our flame look bigger by adding a higher frequency in our textures tab. You saw how we can make it look have more glow with this gain. You can even add swirl. You can add turbulence to get the effect you're looking for. We added a cool field to kind of push it off to the side here. So really, just whatever look you're trying to create determines how you're going to use these values. But we could even probably turn our frequency up to 8 and make it look a little bit better, and this frequency to 3.5, our depth max to 5, and that's going to make it look completely different, so just by, let me get a different view here so we can really see. Just by changing these effects in our textures tab, you're not really changing the simulation at all. All you're doing is changing the way it renders out. And that's what's really cool about doing dynamics this way. So you can see there, that's even looking better. And of course, our smoke is just flat. It's there's no depth to it, and you can add some lights to your scene to highlight the different areas of the smoke. And that's what I did with the example. I think I created a couple spotlights, and I'll just take a look here, create some spotlights, and make sure one's texturing this side here, and I think I did it on the side, like right about here, and create another one. Just a simple light setup. Give them opposite down below. Give it less of a intensity, 0.5. Basically, just so your smoke now has some light to it. So I rendered it out from like this angle right here. You can see more of the lighting is affecting it, and you could even change the color of your light to match your scene, however you want to do it. But this tutorial is basically over. Hopefully you guys learned a whole bunch. And as always, let me know if you have any questions or comments, and we will see you next time.